Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to the podcast. Happy New Year, December 31st, last day of the 2024. And I've got a guest actually from this New York City, John DeMato, and he is going to tell us all about the importance of visual storytelling and delivering magic to your clients, your customers. And I'm really happy to have him on. So, John, welcome.
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Briefly introduce yourself, and I'm excited to dive into the comments and the questions.
Sure. So I'm a visual storytelling expert, and I primarily serve experts who speak on stages. They coach, train, consult, and they write books, as well as work in other professional services. And the goal for what I do is to help my clients create that perception of authority in the eyes of those they serve through branding, photos of their events, as well as photos of their books.
Yeah, and I really love that. When you think about the most powerful brands, Disney, like Marvel, all of these, they all employ what you're talking about is this visual storytelling. And so for the audience, the first thing is talking about is how can visual storytelling enhance a brand's messaging and credibility, especially for thought leaders like speakers and authors?
It's all about creating an opportunity to be genuine in front of the camera. It's also an opportunity to show their audiences, for the lack of a better phrase, how the sausage is made. What's the process look like? It allows their clients or potential clients in the audience to get a better understanding of what it's like to work with them, to be able to envision themselves being in that chair. If someone's speaking, they're in that audience, or if they're in a mastermind or some kind of a coaching or training program, they're sitting at the table. And what those photos do is help increase the learning curve in terms of getting them up to speed on what to expect if they were to say, I want to hire you to help me get past what's holding me back. In addition to that piece, there's also the personality piece. So when you're looking at these images, you're not just getting a sense of what it's like to work with them, but you're also getting a sense of who that person is, their personality, their essence. And when you're doing that, that also helps the person in the audience to qualify whether or not they're the right type of fit for them to bring in and help bring up a part of that transformation towards them.
Interesting. And I love this idea because a lot of the audience here, they're building brands on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and especially public speaking. Talk about this idea because a lot of it's who you know, like, and trust, and how do you build trust through authentic imagery?
Right. So the key thing is to, first of all, start at the top. When it comes to sharing images, it's not just about sharing photos that create a level of satisfying that vanity piece. It's about creating images that are telling the full story, painting the full broad stroke of who you are, who you serve, the problems you solve, and how you solve those problems. So when we're talking about building a brand, show people what are the aspects of your business that help transform your clients' lives. What is interesting to you in terms of outside of the scope of your business. All of these pieces add up together and give your audience a better sense of what it looks like in your day-to-day world. And that's what we're trying to do here, because at the end of the day, regardless of what type of business you have, if you're in the service-based business sector, you are in the business of building relationships. And some of those relationships are a bit of a longer term game in terms of getting people interested in not just following you and connecting with you, but also gaining their trust and connecting more deeply with them. So when you share consistently images across not just your online content, but across every touch point of your online presence, and there is that level of high quality images that are very genuine and very revealing of your process and your day to day, that gives you a much better opportunity to be able to shorten that time from people being introduced to you wherever they come into your ecosystem to saying, yes, you are the solution to my problem. Let's get to work.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you talk about consistency and authenticity. The other question I have for you is, for example, how do you employ your visual storytelling strategy and the key concepts if, for example, if if your medium is spoken words or if they are written words, how can you employ this idea to your audience if you're a public speaker or if you're a writer?
Aside from the fact that you would get images showing people what that looks like, one of the things that visual storytelling does is it proves what you say is true based on how you show up in those photos. So first and foremost, what you want to do is make sure that you're showing people, if you say that you're a coach, show them how that looks. Is it on a screen? Is it in person? Is it one-to-one? Is it one to a group? Is it one to many? You need to show people that. If you're a keynote speaker, you're on that stage, show them what it looks like. If you do virtual stuff, again, if you're on a screen, show the screen and how you show up in that way. But the other piece with regards to visual storytelling is that when you're sharing your words, if you're an author, for example, and you're talking about key concepts or a part of your framework within your book, it's not enough to just share the story. You have to capture people's attention when they're scrolling through their feeds. So it's important to be strategic and intentional about the types of photos that you're using to draw people's attention in. And specifically, what you're looking for is to visually punctuate the sentiment of the stories that you are sharing. And the way that you do that is identify the emotion, the sentiment of those words, and then look into your image library and identify an image that complements that sentiment and emotion. And that way, it completes the circle, so to speak, of words and visuals, and it creates more impactful content. And this philosophy of visual punctuation is not exclusive to online content. Anytime that you share any words anywhere at any time, it is essential that you complement whatever that copy, those words, those the branding elements, whatever you're using, the visual needs to complement whatever you're using to be able to have that greater impact, to be able to attract more eyeballs into your world.
And how does your strategy change, for example, if your audience is predominantly auditory, or if they are different types of learning, or if they have different sensory, if they respond differently to different senses, if you're auditory versus visual? For example, if you're trying to tell a story visually, and let's say you have a podcast that's predominantly audio, how would the tools and techniques used in your area of expertise apply to someone whose audience is primarily auditory learners?
At the end of the day, human beings are wired to make meaning through visuals. So it starts with the visual. For example, someone might stumble across your podcast, this podcast right here. Chances are they're not going to stumble across it by listening to it. They're going to see it first. So essentially, what you would want to do in terms of promoting this podcast, aside from the video clips and the sound bites and the artwork that you're sharing for the podcast itself, the other way that you could do it is share some behind the scenes nuggets with regards to the process of putting this podcast together, and then having corresponding images that you can use that complement those stories. one way you could do that. And I have done this with several clients who have podcasts. I've shot behind the scenes of them recording it, or during their branding session, we've recreated what their podcast setup looks like. So they've brought their microphone with the boom arm, and they've had the extra monitor, and they have all this other stuff, and they set it up in the space in which we're shooting. And I've captured them recreating what that looks like by speaking to their screen and looking into the camera and all of those different things. Those types of images are very compelling because in many cases, podcasters don't really do that. Or it's not as popular as I would like it to be with regards to maintaining this genuine visual storytelling ethos that I obviously follow and I impart upon my clients to follow as well. So there are opportunities for people to be able to share whatever it is that they do in their business through visuals. It's simply a matter of identifying what are those areas. So it's not just their business, but it would also be their promotional vehicles like a podcast. The other option would be if someone is a writer, a guest contributor to some like Forbes or Inc. or something like that. One of the ways to showcase what that looks like is capturing them creating their articles. If they're analog and they write in a notepad, show that, get images of that, talk about that process, repurpose those images in different ways through their online content and on their website. And if they're digital, show what that looks like while they're typing. Some folks do audio recordings and then transcribe it, capture photos of that. At the end of the day, everything that's done is with intention and strategy behind it to be able to leverage those images and not just have them sit on their desktop collecting dust doing nothing.
Yeah, I love how you said that. I know we have around 7-8 minutes remaining, and for those interested in creating a consistent visual strategy and how influencers, thought leaders can develop a cohesive visual strategy that aligns with their overall brand and messaging.
The first place to start is at the top. Where do you plan on using these images? Think about all of the different online and offline touch points that you have. Your website, your content, any types of special organizations you're part of and you have a profile, all the landing pages that you use for your sales vehicles. Think about where everything needs to go first. And then you then start by then thinking about how you want to be perceived by your audience. What are the words that illustrate that perception? Write those down. And then think about the aspects of your personality that you want to convey to your audience and write those words down. Those 8 to 12 words are essential because that is the constellation that you need to think about of words that represent the emotion and the sentiment that you want to create throughout your entire image portfolio, because that will help shape the types of images that you want to create. And then on top of that, think about the different services and products that you have and work with a photographer that's able to capture all of those different tentacles to your business and be able to then think about where is the best place to photograph all of these photos. Is it in your home? Is it in your office? Is your office in your home, and can you recreate that? Are you spending a lot of time in boardrooms? And if that's the case, is a co-working space the best option for you? So there's a lot of stuff to unearth and write down. But the most important thing to keep in mind when you're putting a strategy together is that you do not show up to a branding session, an event, where you just hire a photographer and hope that he or she captures what you need. There needs to be clear communication between you and that photographer to understand the objective for every second that they're there, to be able to maximize the value of your investment in that person capturing the thing that they are there to do.
Yeah, I really love that last statement is clear communication and that way exactly maximizing your ROI. Another question I have for you is how is visual storytelling evolving and especially with Gen AI and how has it evolved in recent years and what trends do you see shaping its future in marketing?
As far as AI is concerned, in terms of AI photography, I'm not the biggest fan of it when it comes to people using that as their primary images. It's very disingenuous and it feels like you're hiding something. It's akin to using a photo from 15 years ago and you look like a completely different person. And people see these images and they think to themselves, they see the photo and then they see you in real life and they're like, who the hell is that person? The problem with using AI generated images is that you're putting friction between you and your audience. And what you're doing is you're forcing them to look past the fact that it feels like you're hiding, and that affects trust. And you don't want to break the trust with your audience because you need to look like the person you are in your photos as you do in real life. So, as far as using these images for your personal profile and have some fun with it every now and then and point out the fact that it is an AI generated photo, that's fine. But if you're using it as your main headshot and you're using it and not pointing out the fact that it's AI generated, that's problematic. And as far as the trends for visual storytelling, stories have been told for thousands of years. Nothing has changed. It's all the same. The way that I photograph my people in this year is the same way that I did 10 years ago. It really all boils down to who the person is and understanding that and putting them in a position to create a wealth of images that they can leverage all across their website, all across the different touch points of their online presence, and create that perception of authority by using a variety of images and not just picking the two or three that you like very much for various reasons and spreading them all over the place. When you only use a small handful of photos, you look cheap. You don't look like you're worth what you charge, let alone worth more than what you charge. So when you use a wealth of images that have these wonderful aesthetics to them and angles and lighting and expression changes and body language changes and different activities captured in front of the camera, now you're creating that perception of being the go-to authority in your space.
Yeah, fascinating. I really, and then, so how can people find you and follow you, reach out to you, check out your work and work with you?
The simplest place to go is my website, johndemato.com. There you can also find all of my social handles and you can follow me on all of those different platforms. Also, for those who are interested in learning more about visual storytelling for experts, you can sign up for my blog also on my website. I write 3 blogs a week and I talk all about different aspects of branding, photography, and events, as well as book photography too.
Awesome. I really enjoyed this conversation. Happy New Year. Congratulations to your success in 2024 and continuing on in 2025. And thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, the pleasure was all on my side of the camera. Thanks for having me.